I think this is a good opportunity, thanks for inviting me, good opportunity for us to discuss your hopes and aspirations, your thoughts about Singapore, how we can make this a better society, an inclusive society, and a vibrant society. I look forward to the discussion. I'll say some things before we start our discussion to provide a perspective of where I'm coming from, perspective of what the government is trying to do on its part. But I look forward very much to the discussion that we intend to have. Let me just start by saying something very briefly about what's happening in the world around us. We're a very small society, and it always pays to observe what's happening in Europe, the United States, Japan, what's happening in the emerging world, China, India, Southeast Asia, as well as places further afield. Study what we can learn, observe the things that others are better at compared to us, and see if we can adopt some of their practices, but also avoid some of the mistakes that other societies make over time. It's always been part of our standard operating procedure in policy making and in politics, to keep looking outward, always trying to see what we can learn, what we can adapt, but also seeing what we should avoid. And it's something that I personally spend a lot of time doing as part of my job and just as part of my personal makeup. The world is not in a pretty shape. I think we all know that. Europe is going through a protracted crisis for which there's no easy solution. The United States is growing at, it seems, subpar growth. In other words, it's growing at a rate that is well below what is necessary to bring levels of unemployment down. Bring unemployment down from what is a quite unacceptable level, over 8%. And in fact, for people who are in the minorities, the blacks and Hispanics and others, and for other disadvantaged groups, you're really talking about unemployment that's well above 20%. So the US is still growing well below what is required to bring unemployment down. Even in the emerging world, you find that unemployment is a problem. China and India, which are the most rapidly growing emerging countries, growing at between 6 to 8%, they too see significant unemployment for the young, and particularly for graduates. Young graduates in China have an unemployment rate of about 9%, a very similar number for India, 9% unemployment rate for young graduates. So if you, to present the story in a very short way, the world economy is slowing down, but the cost is being seen especially amongst the young. Young people all over the world are facing tougher times. Difficulty in getting a job, difficulty in getting a good job. And in fact, in the United States, quite apart from unemployment, the jobs that are being created are increasingly low-pay jobs in services especially. So this is a real problem. What used to be a society that was dominated by a middle class, you leave high school, in fact, in the past, in the United States, in the 60s and 70s, even if you didn't go to college, you leave high school, you join a firm, you are assured of a reasonably good middle-class life, owning a home, having a car very often, and looking forward to more or less lifelong employment. That is no longer the case. The middle-class dream has been shattered, and middle-class jobs are harder to come by. What's being created instead is more low-pay jobs and more jobs at the very top. Small number of jobs at the very top that are paying very well, a significant number of jobs being created at the bottom, but a gradual weakening of jobs in the middle. The economists call this job polarization. More jobs being created at the extremes, less jobs being created in the middle. So that's happening in the US. It is also beginning to happen in Europe and in Japan. And I think this situation that we are seeing in advanced economies is a situation that reflects a global phenomenon. Globalization is still continuing. the IT revolution and what it means for automation in every sector of the economy is still continuing, and all jobs are now subject to competition. So the trends that we see in the advanced economies are trends that will also affect us as a relatively advanced developing economy. And we have to do all we can to avoid the same fate. All we can to ensure that unemployment remains low, that young people can find jobs easily, middle-aged and older people who lose their jobs, they too should be able to find jobs easily and find a pathway from old jobs to new jobs. We have to ensure that that remains the case. We have to ensure that most of our population continues to see an improvement in their standard of living, whereas for much of the advanced world, median incomes, the incomes of the middle class, have stagnated or declined. And in fact, even in some parts of Asia which are not advanced, places like Taiwan and elsewhere, median incomes have in fact declined in the last 5 years. So in Singapore, we've still seen it rise. We've seen a significant improvement in median incomes adjusted for inflation in the last 5 years. The lower end of our workforce, the bottom 20%, have also seen a lift in incomes in the last 5 years, but that merely offset a decline in incomes in the first half of the last decade. So if you take the last 10 years as a whole, our low-income group has not done well. Our low-income workers have not done well. They saw a lift in the last 5 years, but it merely offset a decline in the first 5 years in real terms. So they saw no increase on average, no increase in real incomes over the 10 years. On a household basis, they saw an improvement in incomes because more people got jobs. But individual low-income workers did not see an increase in incomes over the last 10 years in real terms when we take away, when we adjust for inflation. So we've got challenges. First, to avoid what we see in the advanced economies. Second, to just keep up the progress that we have been able to achieve so far, where the majority of the population is able to move up every 5 to 10 years. And it does not come automatically. And in particular, the lesson that we're getting from everything happening in the world is that inclusive growth and an inclusive society does not come automatically and is increasingly a challenge. For every society, it is increasingly a challenge. Growth itself does not lift all boats. And it certainly does not lift all boats equally. So something more has to be done besides economic growth. Something more has to be done to level up everyone and to ensure that everyone shares in progress, and in particular, to ensure that those who start off with less have got real opportunities to move up, to improve, and see better lives. It does not come automatically. It requires careful interventions, sustainable interventions, and it requires a good dose of compassion. Let me state first what I feel our philosophy should be. Let me nail my flag to the mast. I believe in a philosophy, and I believe that this has to be the philosophy that has to remain at the core of what the government is about, at the core of our agenda. A philosophy that is socially progressive. Our agenda has to be socially progressive. What does that mean? It means we have to strive to achieve a fair and just society, even as we run a vibrant economy. Strive to achieve a fair and just society for each generation and each cohort of Singaporeans, even as we sustain a vibrant economy. And both these are challenges. Achieving a vibrant economy is a challenge in a highly competitive world. Achieving a fair and just society is a challenge. And achieving a fair and just society at the same time that we sustain a vibrant economy is even more a challenge. But I believe we can achieve it. I believe we can achieve it. It requires policies which are tilted in favor of those with less. meaning policies which focus on providing more opportunities for children who start off with less, children who start off with a disadvantage, policies which provide opportunity for low-income workers to upgrade themselves, improve, and get fair reward at the workplace, and policies which take care of the elderly, particularly the poor and middle-income elderly. That's what our progressive agenda is about. And that's core to building an inclusive society. Our economy has to remain driven by market forces and entrepreneurial energy, but we cannot leave our society, we cannot leave our social compact to market forces, because that will lead to increasingly wide divisions, increasingly wide gaps in wealth and income. It's in the nature of the modern economy and the modern globalized world. It cannot be avoided. Every society is seeing this, including the Scandinavian economies. In fact, Finland, for example, which is thoroughly Scandinavian in its government policies, taxes, and distribution, before taxes and distribution, its Gini coefficients are no different from Singapore, in fact, a little higher. It's seeing exactly the same phenomenon. Sweden, Gini coefficient before taxes and transfers, only slightly lower than us, about 0.42. Finland is about 0.47. Even they have seen a very significant increase in inequality. It's in the nature of the modern global economy. But we cannot take that as a given. We can't take that as a given. We've got to intervene to mitigate the disparities in wealth and income that are part and parcel of the modern globalized economy. And we've got to do it with a fair dose of fairness and a sense of justice for all. What it requires, therefore, is an activist government, a government that is focused on social mobility and on guarding against the extremes in wealth and income. But it also requires more than an activist government, because a progressive agenda is incomplete and unsustainable without some additional pieces besides an activist government. It requires fundamentally a system which encourages and rewards individual initiative and responsibility for the family. That has to be at the core of our society. It has been and must remain at the core of our social culture. Individual effort and responsibility for the family. It must also include a workplace culture that treats all employees with respect and ensures that workers are rewarded fairly. And it must include community initiative, where Singaporeans pursue causes which they feel lead to a better society and who want to do something to hold the hand of their fellow citizens and help them see a better life. So all four components are necessary: an activist government dedicated to sustaining social mobility and uplifting the lot of those who start off with less, a culture of individual effort and responsibility, a workplace culture that respects and rewards workers fairly, and a spirit of community activism where everyone gets in the act of making this a better society. We need all four components if we are to sustain an inclusive society and a vibrant one. And the major lesson that we get from many other societies, particularly the more advanced ones, is that what started off very well, in fact, the welfare state was not a bad ideal when it first started. It was not a bad ideal politically and socially, but it eventually, through its construction and through the way these policies were enacted, implemented, it gradually eroded that sense of individual effort and responsibility, and it increasingly led to political promises of benefits that exceeded the capacity of their economies to pay. That's at the heart of the problem that we see in the advanced world today. It is fundamentally not a financial crisis, but a crisis of social systems, that they have promised benefits that exceed the capacity of their economies to pay.